Christmas week, and welcome everyone. And I hope you're staying safe and healthy. First item we need to do following calling the meeting to order is discuss the necessity for conducting an electronic meeting. I think Governor Lee and Tennessee continue to function and conduct the necessary business electronically.
It was lost Bill's audio.
Okay. You just lost mine?
You're back, Bill. You just froze for a moment. If you could read that again.
Okay. All right. Both Governor Lee and Governor Northam have indicated that due to the coronavirus pandemic, that governing bodies will have the ability to meet electronically to conduct the necessary business of government during the period of the pandemic. In order to do this, we do have to have a vote, have a motion and a second and an affirmative vote that it is necessary to protect public safety of those attending the meeting that we do meet electronically. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion to do so.
I make a motion.
Okay, that's Danny Griffin making a motion to authorize this board to meet electronically. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have Mayor Luttrell as a second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. The next item on the business is the consideration of our minutes from the September 21st, 2020 meeting. They were distributed in your packets at the end of last week. Do we have any additions, deletions, corrections, or a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
And that sounded like Danny. We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Don Bowman, I make a second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay. And Councilman Turner's also joined us now. So we've got, I think we have everyone present. Matt, as you're taking roll. Okay, we have no items of old business, but we do have three items of new business. The first is our financial report, or our CAFR, for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2020. Tara, would you like to introduce James to the group, and then James will make the presentation?
Yes, sir. James Spence is the partner with Molden and Jenkins, and Molden and Jenkins conducted our audit this year, and I'll let James take it from there.
Thank you, Tara. Good morning, everyone. As she mentioned, my name is James Spence with Molden and Jenkins, and I was the audit engagement partner on this year's audit. I'm sharing, hopefully sharing the right screen, but I've got our auditor's discussion and analysis that I'm going to go through. It kind of summarizes the highlights and the items that we're required to communicate to the board. It's 24 pages. I don't intend to read all 24 to you, but certainly as we go through any questions you may have along the way, please feel free to interrupt and we'll address those at that time. But to get going, one of the things we always like to kind of point out and remind everyone, because again, we typically only see the governing body once a year at the presentations, but Molden and Jenkins does highly invest in our local government industry. It's a big part of what our firm does, and it's about 33% of what our firm does as of our last fiscal year. We work with about 500 different local governments throughout the Southeast, and we are considered a large regional firm with offices in 7 different states throughout the Southeast, including Tennessee. So I served as the audit engagement partner. I've been with Molden and Jenkins for over 17 years now, and all 17 have been spent doing nothing but serving local governments. So it's something I spend 100% of my time with, along with 10 other partners in our firm who do that. Every audit that we do provide an audit service for. We always have 2 partners involved. We have an engagement partner, and then we have a quality control partner. At the bottom of this page, on page 2, you'll see Doug Moses served as that role. He's been with our firm for over 21 years, and he's been same as I, serving local governments 100% of the time. As part of the audit, we always want to make sure everyone, I'm not sure if we have anyone from the media out there, but we always want to make sure that it's clear who plays what roles in the audit process. And so as the external auditor, we are independent from the decision-making process, and we conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as government auditing standards, which require us to be able to issue an opinion as to whether or not the financial statements prepared by management are materially correct. And so through that process, we don't test 100% of the transactions. Standards don't require that, and we don't give absolute assurance, but we do give an opinion, which this year was an unmodified opinion, which states that the financial statements as prepared by management are materially correct as they're presented. That's the clean opinion. That's what you've received in the past, and that's what all local governments are striving to achieve. At this point, I'm going to flip over to, to the financial statements. And one thing that with an entity, like a full accrual entity like yourself, that most people tend to look at to kind of gauge how the year went is your cash flow statement. And so obviously you all are a little bit different in the sense that you don't carry a cash balance, but it still gives good feedback on how the year went. And so you'll see our cash flows from this year. We ended up using about $1 million in our operating activities, and that is ultimately supported with some grants that we've received, as well as our capital contributions that we received from the cities. And so at the end of the year, again, we don't carry a cash position at the authority, so the ending cash was a net to zero, which is what you've typically had. As part of the audit, we also do issue a compliance report, which includes our results of any findings of deficiencies in the internal control structure. This year, as in the past, we've issued our Yellow Book report, and in that report, happy to announce that we did not have any material weaknesses that we were reported. So again, the internal controls and the accounting function are working materially correct to allow the financial statements to be presented materially correct. On page 8, a couple of the items that we want to make sure to pull out in there. We do, as part of the audit process on page 8 and page 9, we do, for those who've not gone through an audit, we do provide a list of items that we need information on from management. This year's audit was conducted for the most part in a remote fashion. And so while an audit is always a fun experience, and I say fun, we ask for a bunch of information, we get what we need, and then we start to ask more questions as we dive into the details. We do appreciate management's responsiveness and cooperation in getting us the information to allow us to conduct the audit that we needed. So we did not have any disagreements or difficulties working with management. And through the audit process, we didn't have any auditor proposed adjustments that were required to be made. So again, as I noted a few pages back, we did not have any material weaknesses in internal controls, but it's also a good little feather in the hat that we did not have any auditor proposed entries. And so that means the financial statements were materially correct and unchanged from the time we received them. Starting on page 10, there's several pages here that I'm not going to read through the details, but just to kind of highlight, GASB, who is the accounting standard setting body for the sewage system. They've been very busy, I guess is one way to put it. We've got about 10 to 12 standards coming out in the next 3 years that may or may not be applicable to the system as it moves forward. GASB 95 came out this year due to the pandemic and essentially deferred any implementations that were required for 2020 and pushed them all into at least 2021 and moving forward. But there are several different standards that we try to work with management to make sure they're aware of, at the start of the fiscal years and as they become required to be implemented. But we always want to make sure to provide that information to governance, because obviously the decisions you all make can change what's not currently applicable and make it applicable based on decisions of the board. So we provide the information. GASB 87 is really the biggest hot topic item for most local governments. It's probably not really going to affect you, but again, with GASB 95's deferral, this has been postponed until fiscal year 2022 for you all. So not as urgent of a pressing statement as it was a year ago. But there's several pages of these. And so again, we try to provide that information to you all, but we will, as part of our process, we always try to work with management to make sure they're aware and trained up on what they need to do from an accounting standpoint. So with that, that's the results of this year's audit. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Do we have any questions for James? Okay, this item does not require an official acceptance. This is more of a reporting type function. So If there are no questions for James, we'll move on to item B under new business. James, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay, under item B for new business, we have a proposed construction, a contract for repairs to final clarifier number 4. Bids were opened on November 16th, and we have an apparent low bidder. Will Witcher, Utility Services Manager, will detail this issue. This item will require a vote, and Matt, if we could do a roll call vote at the end of the presentation and discussion, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Will?
Yes, this is final clarifier number 4. We are currently in the process of rehabbing and replacing the mechanical components of clarifier number 3. We had similar bid response to clarifier number 4 as we did to number 3, with W&O Construction Company of Livingston, Tennessee as the low bidder. The project was within, or the bid amount was within budget, and we have had good success in the current project with W&O. So as soon as, I think the plan is to present this to council for their approval at the January meeting, and then we will issue a notice of award and notice to proceed once that's been approved. The intent is to complete the replacement of the final clarifier components this fiscal year. There has been a little bit of an extended lead time on getting parts and pieces for clarifier 3 due to supply chain issues with COVID and other issues. So we're probably expecting to get started on the actual replacement component of this project sometime next summer. But with that being said, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is the final replacement project of the final clarifiers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so once this project is complete, all 4 of our final clarifiers will have their components updated and be in pretty good shape for several years. So,
Matt, if I'm not mistaken, those clarifiers were part of the plant upgrade in the mid-1980s. So this is equipment dating back to that period, that time period.
That's correct. Yep.
Are there questions regarding the project or the bids? From a funding standpoint, this is identified as council, or not council, but as the Sewer Oversight Committee is aware. We annually contribute approximately $250,000 to what we consider large ticket item maintenance and repairs to the wastewater plant. As indicated, when you look at our plant, it was initially constructed in 1972, and then in the mid to late 80s went through significant plant upgrades and overhauls. So now we're at that point where a number of critical components are routinely slated for significant repairs, and this is one of those items. And it goes back to this ties back to the capital improvement plan that the Oversight Committee approved back in September. As Will indicated, assuming we have an affirmative vote from the Oversight Committee today, we will place this on Bristol, Tennessee City Council agenda on January 5th for the formal consideration. And then Don, I'm sure you probably do a corresponding consideration with your governing body at some point in early January also. Are there questions regarding the project or the bid results? Hearing none, Matt, would you like to call the roll?
I will. Mr. Soar?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Luttrell? Malin, can you hear me?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bagnall?
Aye.
Mr. Griffith?
Aye.
And Mr. Turner?
Aye.
Bill, it was unanimous.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. Next item on the business is the Tennessee Department of Environment, Conservation, and the Wastewater Treatment Plant Performance Audit. On a periodic basis, TDEC evaluates our treatment plant as well as our collection system for compliance to all aspects of our MPDS permit. That compliance review was conducted on July the 28th through the July the 30th of this summer. We received the results of that, approximately 4 to 5 weeks ago. We have provided responses to that. From the plant side, I'm going to ask Matt to speak to aspects of the review that are specific to the plant, and then I'll ask Will Witcher to speak to those aspects that are specific to the collection system. Matt?
Okay. Well, first of all, I've been doing this operating plants for quite a while, and this was the most in-depth inspection that I've ever been associated with. They started asking for documents before they came on site. They had a team of 3 that were on site. There's one that was on call. She was in Nashville and couldn't travel due to the restrictions. But after all that, they didn't really find a whole lot. Most of what they did find was as minor. I wouldn't think anything that they found here was of anything that would really be considered a serious issue. You know, there's a couple of things like the sampler volume wasn't where it should be. We checked that daily. For some reason on that day, it wasn't where it's supposed to be at 100 milliliters. The effluent composite sampler, when they were here, it was in the heat of the summer, and that building is it's a small building outside, of course, and the ambient temperature was real high that day. So that took a little bit of work. We put an air conditioner in there to keep that cool, to help that refrigeration unit out. And then we had to come up with the GPS coordinates for the influent and effluent sampler. And I just lost y'all for a second. I hope up and back. A couple other things here. There's a couple of pumps at our stations that weren't operating that day. And we check those things daily, or at least 3 times a week. And they were working the day before, but not that day. That's just how kind of things go on that. But we got all that corrected the next day, if not the same day. Had a pump station that had a leaking discharge line, but we knew about that and already had repairs scheduled, and we've got it repaired the next week. There was some documentation issues in the laboratory, real minor, that they wanted us to change some things, and I could go into those if anybody is interested in it, but it's mostly just kind of documentation type things that we took care of most of them at the time they were here. Does anyone have any questions on the plant part of it?
No.
Okay, Will, you want to move through the collection system side?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here, so bear with me just 1 second. Let me get this. Can you all see my screen?
Mhm.
It's starting to come up.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, as Bill mentioned, there were 2 primary components to the audit. First being plant performance measures, and the second being sanitary sewer overflows. I'll talk a little bit about the overflows here, and this is kind of a highlight. Basically, as Matt mentioned, the TDEC was on site July 28th through 30th. They inspected the plant and several of our lift stations. We received a response from TDEC November 5th, and we submitted our response to them on December the 4th. And they did note in their report that there were 2 points within our collection system that were identified as chronic overflow points. And what a chronic overflow point is a location within the system where there are greater than 5 overflows within a rolling 12-month period. And that's based on, once the 12-month period is complete, any previous overflows will roll off. And we had 2 chronic overflow points during this period: Sinking Creek Pump Station and Tri-County Industrial Park Pump Station. I'll talk about Tri-County first. Tri-County is located in Piney Flats. It basically collects wastewater flow from the industrial park area east of Highway 11E. It's important to note that the Piney Flats Basin does collect flow as well from Bluff City and all of Bluff City and a portion of Johnson City's collection system. So in addition to Bristol, Tennessee, there are other entities that are in play here. And the Lakeview Pump Station ultimately collects all the flow from Piney Flats. The Lakeview Station, if you drive across the 11 Bridge and look to the west, you can see it down there on Blue Lake, and it basically collects all the flow from that basin and pumps it to our gravity system up there by the Speedway. I believe we had 7 SSOs at Tri-County in the 12-month period when the audit was performed. Currently, we have dropped one of those off. We are currently sitting at 6. And it's important to note that in February, 3 of those 6 overflows will roll off, and hopefully we'll be okay for the next 6 weeks or so, and we can get 3 of those to drop off. One thing I did want to mention is about Tri-County. Tri-County, as we discussed, is a contributing pump station to the Lakeview Station. So all the flow collected at Tri-County from the industrial park is pumped to the gravity system, which ultimately discharges to the Lakeview Station on Lakeview Drive. We had a study performed a few years ago by J.R. Wofford and Company, consulting engineer, and on the Piney Flats Basin. And one of the things they noted is that for one reason or another, the Tri-County pump station had a hydraulic pumping capacity that was greater than the Lakeview Station. So effectively what this meant is that the Lakeview Station is a bottleneck in the system. And the way that the system has been operated to mitigate that is that if we have an imminent overflow at the Lakeview Station, the Tri-County Station will be shut off temporarily in order to allow the Lakeview Station to catch back up and to avoid an overflow at that location. One reason for this is that an overflow at Tri-County is much easier to manage than an overflow at the Lakeview Station, Lakeview being in close proximity to Dean Lake. So that's why you see that high number of SSOs, basically because the Tri-County Station has overwhelmed the Lakeview Station. And the state is aware of this. We discussed this with them on occasion, and they are aware of the issue. So in order to mitigate that, the first thing that we did this past year is we completed a $1.1 million upgrade to the Lakeview pump station, which basically increased the pumping capacity at Lakeview to handle all the current flows, including wet weather flows within the basin. The existing conditions at Lakeview, we have 3 pumps. We now have 4 pumps. One of the original pumps was replaced with a higher capacity pump, and a 4th pump was added. So since these upgrades have occurred, we have had no overflows at the Tri-County Station. So we are confident that this project will help to significantly alleviate future issues with overflows. And then a second issue that we've identified is a truck sewer line along Mountain View Drive within the Tri-County Basin, which is subject to significant inflow and infiltration. And we are looking at programming that into the CIP to replace that line to basically mitigate the I&I to the Tri-County pump station. Before I move on to Sinking Creek, are there any questions related to Tri-County pump station and Piney Flats Basin?
Yeah, Will, I have one. Is this primarily due to growth, or is it mainly due to the wet season we had? Or a combination, I guess.
I think what you're seeing is primarily this is an issue related to wet weather. There was an article published actually in the Herald Courier over the weekend about the rainfall we've seen in the last 3 years is basically unprecedented since record keeping was started 80, 90 years ago. Just to give you an idea, our average rainfall in the Tri-Cities area is about 41 to 42 inches a year. And 2020 will be the 3rd straight year where we've experienced over, I believe it's 55 inches of rainfall. So this is kind of an anomaly just due to the wet weather. Others may be able to speak to growth in Piney Flats. You know, I know we've had a little bit of growth in that area, but I can't really speak to the growth in the last few years. Bill, I don't know if you have any insight into that or not.
Mayor, I would absolutely agree with Will. These events are wet weather driven. The amount of growth in that area is not significant at all. It's the most significant element of all of this, and the Sinking Creek too, is wet weather events that exceed our capacity to deal with them. And these are inflow events. You know, you're familiar with our term of inflow and infiltration. These are not infiltration events. These are inflow events. And when you see a rapid spike, and Will's going to get into momentarily as we get into the Sinking Creek sewer shed, you're going to see how single events can impact the flow in a particular area. So, and these are all inflow, or what we term as inflow related. So, the issue is if you can address the inflow, then you really stay in compliance. And as far as the Piney Flats Basin is concerned, the improvements made at the Lakeview Pump Station, that was a hydraulic bottleneck that kept the Tri-County station from pumping at its full capacity. Due to if you're going to overflow an event, it's better to happen at the Tri-County station where there's really nothing around it than it is the Lakeview Pump Station, in which there's a lake right next to it. So the now that bottleneck at the Lakeview station has been addressed, I don't foresee issues in this Piney Flats Basin. We've still got work to do in the Sinking Creek Basin to avoid overflows, and Will's going to walk you through that. He's going to give you the flow data there. He's going to illustrate this by tying it back to wet weather events. So I think you'll begin to see the cause and effect as we move into the Sinking Creek station analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions on the Piney Flats Basin before I move on? Okay. The Sinking Creek Basin, for those of you who aren't familiar with our collection system, the Sinking Creek Pump Station is the downstream collector of the Sinking Creek Basin. It's located off of Old Jonesboro Road at the intersection of Paperville Road near the Tulip Grove condominium development there. Basically, the Sinking Creek Basin is a large basin. The city of Bristol, Tennessee, our collection system, basically east of King College all the way out to the Country Club and Terra Hills, Middlebrook, that area, is part of the Sinking Creek Basin. On the Virginia side, portions of East Bristol, Virginia, including areas around Old Airport Road and Bonham Road, are part of the basin. And then a significant portion of Washington County Service Authority's basin, basically extending up Old Jonesboro Road, including the Virginian and some of the rural areas up to exit 10, are part of the Sinking Creek Basin. So the Sinking Creek Pump Station, which the city of Bristol, Tennessee operates, collects sewer flows from this entire basin. As you can see here, we've given some statistics on the average flows and the wet weather flows that are measured at the pump station. The city of Bristol's portion of the dry weather base flow is about 275 gallons per minute, which is about 80% of the base flow. And then the combined flow from BDU and Washington County portions of the basin are about 75 gallons per minute, which comprise about 21% of the flow. So we see a total base flow of about 350 GPM. And this is just dry weather flow without rainfall included in the base flow. If you look at the peak wet weather flows that we've monitored, we've broken it down by contributor. The city of Bristol's inflow and infiltration I should say the total flow that Bristol, Tennessee contributes to wet weather events ranges anywhere from 650 to 1,240 gallons per minute, which is a peaking factor of 2.4 to 4.5. And that peaking factor is basically just the percentage of flow above base flow. So we contribute 240 to 450% of the base flow during wet weather events. We have a flow meter, and BBU has a flow meter as well, where the collection system crosses the state line up behind Middlebrook and the reserve. And BBU in Washington County's flow has been measured anywhere from 480 to 1,300 gallons per minute, which is a 6.5 to a 17 peaking factor. So when you look at the total wet weather flow at Sinking Creek Pump Station, we've measured within the last year anywhere between 1,400 and 2,500 gallons per minute. And it's important to note that the Sinking Creek Pump Station will overflow anywhere once the flow reaches about 1,800 to 2,000 GPM, just depending upon the concentration, how quickly the rainfall gets there. And then information we've received from BBU show that, Washington County contributes about 44 GPM of base flow and up to 600 GPM during rainfall events. So that's a significant number, that 600, because that could mean the difference between an overflow or not. So we'll discuss that here in just a little bit. At the time of the audit back in July, Sinking Creek had 8 overflows within the rolling 12-month period. Currently, 2 of those have rolled off since July. We're at 6 at the moment. And 3 of those will roll off again in February. We had 3 overflows basically with the second week of February, from February 6th to 13th. If y'all remember, we had about 4 inches of rain in about a 1-week period. We experienced 3 SSOs at that location in February. So again, if we can make it this next 6 weeks, we'll be in pretty good shape, and 3 of those will drop off. This chart has a lot of information on it. I'm just going to kind of pick out the overflow events. If you look at the orange highlighted rows, those show the precipitation and the flow rates during the overflow events that were experienced at Sinking Creek. I'll kind of point your attention over to the really the peaking factor. I think tells most of the story here. We've broken it out by state, meaning the amount of the peak flow that Tennessee and Virginia are contributing to the station. If you look down through there, you'll see that Tennessee's peaking factor is anywhere between about 2.5 up to 4.5, somewhere in that ballpark. Whereas the peaking factor on the Virginia side, anywhere from 6 up to about 17 peaking factor. So we're seeing a significant amount of inflow and infiltration coming from the Virginia side of the line. And as we talked earlier, we've noticed, and BBU, I'm sure, can back us up on this, Washington County, Virginia is a significant contributor to the I&I problem we have in the Sinking Creek Basin. And then this is the data from the rainfall. We had 2 overflow events in April, just showing a similar situation, very high peaking factors from the Virginia side. Are there any questions on that information? I know that's a lot of data to look at, but
I think the important thing to talk about at this point is going forward, what measures are in place in terms of strategies to mitigate the high flows, and then perhaps more importantly, the funding and the timeline for implementation of those plans. And I think, Will, are you addressing that, or is Philip, or I think you're addressing, is that correct?
I am, and Philip, can feel free to jump in as well if he has anything to add. I'll just kind of give you an update on the I&I mitigation that have been undertaken by us and BBU in Washington County. The city hired J.R. Wofford in 2010 to conduct a basin-wide assessment, and basically any deficiencies that were found at that time have been addressed by city maintenance staff. We did hire W.K. Dixon and Company in 2017 to conduct a study on the Sinking Creek Pump Station and provide alternatives that can either increase the capacity of the station or mitigate I&I problems in the basin. One of those items that was identified by W.K. Dixon was to basically remove as much of the contributing flow from Virginia as possible, which we'll discuss here in just a minute. That chart just kind of gives some, an idea of the man hours that the city's devoted to addressing issues in the basin here. We can basically spent 8,000 man hours in the last several years to address this problem. And this information came from BBU. I appreciate Philip and his help in providing this information for us. BBU has done a significant amount of work on their side of the basin as well, including flow metering, smoke testing of lines, replacing sewer lines, and then replacing many of the leaking leaking manholes with watertight framing covers. And we've noticed a significant improvement this year during rainfall events, whereas in previous years, certain rainfall events probably would have triggered an overflow much more quickly. We've had a few rainfall events this fall that have not resulted in an overflow, where in the past we probably would have seen an overflow event. And I think we can, I think the watertight framing covers that Philip has put in have been a big help in that. And this is a chart that Philip provided. This is plan I&I in mitigation in the BBU basin. Philip, do you have anything to add to what you guys are showing here as your planned work? I know you did mention that you found a significant inflow location at the VDOT, the maintenance garage. Is that right?
Yeah, we found a VDOT storm drain that was connected. A large storm basin was connected directly to our sewer system. We're working with VDOT to get that removed. On top of that, we're doing a comprehensive manhole rehabilitation throughout the sewer shed. We're currently inspecting the manholes to be upgraded. We started that last week. We received a significant grant, $50,000 to help fund that, and VGU will contribute an additional $100,000 for that. We've also been more aggressive on our camera work during rainfall events. So any day that it rains, we go out there with a camera and start videoing the lines, and we've already seen an impact. We found 2 locations that need to be repaired. We'll get that addressed this spring or by the spring. So we're definitely addressing it in a very aggressive manner.
Okay. Thank you, Philip. And I'll just touch briefly here. I would like to thank Robbie Cornett at Washington County Search Authority for his help. They were very helpful in providing information to us as part of this response, as was Philip at BBU. This is information that WCSA has provided us. They have done an extensive I&I survey of their basin, particularly in the last couple of years. They did find 84 defective cleanouts in the basin. I think those were primarily located in the Virginian. In addition to installing watertight framing covers on their portion of the system that lies along Sinking Creek and some of the flood-prone areas. I think the big thing to take away from this, though, is the information provided by Washington County is they're currently in the midst of a project, $18 million project, to remove all of their contributing flow from the basin. They received a grant from USDA Rural Development, $18 million grant, to extend sewer service to much of their service area. Part of this will be the construction of a lift station along King Mill Pike at the lower end of their portion of the Sinking Creek Basin, which will pump all their wastewater flow back to the Abingdon wastewater treatment plant. And based on information we've received from Washington County, that project is currently under design, and construction is expected to be completed by fall of 2023. So, we think this is a big thing in getting excessive inflow and infiltration off of Sinking Creek, the Sinking Creek pump station. Certainly, we still have work to do on our side of the basin, and we are continuing to push forward to identify areas that need to be mitigated. But we think this project is going to go a long way in taking care of I&I issues and particularly overflows at Sinking Creek pump station.
And I just want to reiterate that during the 3 overflows events during February. The Washington County trunk line was underwater during that entire time. So it definitely had a significant impact on that.
And Philip, I think you said you all have seen more than 600 GPM at points, haven't you?
That's correct.
Okay. So, again, pulling Washington County's flow off of the basin, it will be the difference between overflowing and not, we believe. And we believe and hope that this will remedy the issue at Sinking Creek. With that, are there any questions I can answer on Sinking Creek?
As indicated earlier, this is a matter of a report to the Oversight Committee, does not require a formal vote. But these are significant issues. They're issues that we've talked about previously. We've talked about the urgency and the importance of addressing the overflows, especially in the Sinking Creek Basin. I think as far as the Tri-County Basin, that has been addressed. But it's very important, especially when you have three political subdivisions discharging into one basin, that all three systems are putting forth the necessary maintenance to address inflow events in that collection system. Any questions? All right, hearing none, then we'll move on to reports. Matt, plant operations report.
Okay, this report covers the period September, October, and November. Effluent quality, the effluent BOD averaged 11 milligrams per liter, which is 89% reduction. Effluent TSS, 10 milligrams per liter, 92% reduction. To put that in perspective, the limits is a 30 milligram per liter on a monthly average and 45 milligrams per liter on the daily max. Because as you can see, we were well below that. The percent removal, we've got to meet a 40% on a daily, any given day, and an 85% on a monthly average. So we were well above that as well. So that's good. The flows average for this 3-month period, 10.8 million gallons per day. And that gives us a 12-month moving average of 14.2. And as you know, the plant design is 15 million gallons a day. So we're still bumping up against that. And that's, it's all due to the rainfall, the wet weather that Will mentioned in the previous report. We've had 3 record-setting years, and it's still this, flow's still real high from that. We didn't have any overflows at the main lift station, although I mentioned in this report that we had 3 when I wrote this, but on December the 1st, one of those rolled off. So we're now at 2 overflows for the 12-month period. I think the next ones, I think we have 2 in February, but the real wet month we had last year, or earlier this year rather. The surge basin has been brought online 214 occasions since it's completed in April of 2003, and it was brought online on 6 occasions this period. But it was all due to high flows from rain events. There was no industrial discharges that we need to handle in the surge basin. Compliance, it wasn't as good as I would have liked to have seen. We did have 3 excursions. We had a residual chlorine that resulted from a partially blocked pump. And we had a load of chemical come in, or it might have been several in a cumulative effect, but we had some debris in the tank. We took that tank down and washed it out, but the way you have to wash it out is from the top. It's a 6,000 gallon tank. It's about 12 feet in diameter. So we got it as good as we could, but evidently there's still some left in there. After this event, we put some filters on the intake side of the pumps, and that seems to be helping quite a bit. We have to clean those periodically. We did have a couple of E. coli's excursions. One was from, we think, from increased demands, chlorine demands rather, from a suspected industrial discharge. On that particular day, we smelled an unusual odor around our chlorine contact basin where the disinfection chemicals are added. Had some other issues within the plant that tended to support that it was an industrial discharge. And then we had one in the fall from a suspected partial nitrification. I know probably no one really knows what that means, but when there's ammonia in the influent of the plant, and there's certain bacteria that reduce that into nitrates and nitrites. And if you have nitrites in the wastewater that you're trying to disinfect, it reacts with the chlorine before any disinfection action can occur. So partial nitrification is a bad thing to have happen in a plant. And we've been having some issues too with filamentous bacteria, and that's based on the DOs, the amount of dissolved oxygen that's in the aeration basin. If we get too high of a DO in the aeration basin, we run the risk of partial nitrification. Too low, we run the risk of filamentous bacteria, which causes the material not to settle well. So it's a fine line that we have to maintain at all times. Didn't have any septic deliveries during the period. Did have one odor complaint from Apple Valley, and we went and checked that out, and there was a faint odor of biosolids. We were loading a lot of biosolids at that particular time for land application. Speaking of land application, we had a pretty successful period. We were able to incorporate some this fall, which is unusual. We haven't been able to do that in the last several years. Incorporation is where we take the material out to the fields and we can apply it a little bit heavier than we can with surface application, but we have to till it into the ground, and then the landowner will plant usually silage corn. This time of year it's going to be probably hay or alfalfa, something like that. Now, surface method, we were able to apply 35 loads, which is a lot lighter, but it was a good, successful year for land application this period. Does anyone have any questions on this?
Okay, Matt, you want to just roll on in then to your industrial monitoring reports, both the quarterly summary and the semi-annual report?
Yes, I will. This covers the same period, September, October, November. The industries didn't do as well this period as they did in the September report. We had 8 NOVs issued. 3 went to dynamic recycling, and 2 went to Shears Foods. 2 went to Bristol, Virginia landfill. Those were all numeric type violations where they didn't meet the permit that we have to issue to these industries. American Merchant had 1 NOV for a non-reporting event. And as I mentioned, we did have 1 excursion from a suspected industrial discharge. We also had a inspection from the TDEC, from the same folks that did the plant inspection. That was conducted on September 16th and 17th, and a report should be in pretty soon. We also submitted the semi-annual report in October, and we had 2 industries in significant non-compliance. That was dynamic recycling and the Bristol, Virginia landfill. Both of those were published in the Bristol Herald Courier as required by EPA. The significant non-compliance is also just a calculation on their compliance, and it's based on EPA guidelines as well. It's nothing that we do on a local level. Does anyone have any questions on that report?
All right, hearing none, we'll move on. It's Tara time. We'll move on with our quarterly financial report.
Okay. One thing I want to point out is that at the beginning of this fiscal year, the percentages changed between how we allocate the expenses between the 2 entities. This year, it's been recorded on a 50-50 basis. So the financial statements will look a little bit different than you saw them last year. Last year, they were on a 52% and a 48% basis. And if you turn to page 1 in your report, the number I always like to point out is that the unrestricted net position pretty much equates to what the cash position is that you build up for capital. So you've got almost $4.2 million right now sitting for capital projects or for future projects that you want to take on. And the other thing, you can't see it from the financial statements, but once a year when we conclude the financial audit, we sit and we analyze how much of the due to each entity, which is basically the additional operating payments we've paid in over time, that we can refund back to each entity. And so after the audit was closed in the first quarter, we did refund back to each entity. We try to keep 2 months of operating expenses in the reserve, and we're pretty close right now. Bristol, Tennessee got a little bit over 18,000 back, and BBU got a little bit close, tried at $10,000 back. So the reserves, the due to City of Bristol, Tennessee, and the due to BBU Authority equate to about 2 months of operating expenses at this point. It's early in the fiscal year, so there's nothing really exciting to point out. I will say that in October, you'll see that we received the grant that was flowing through from the waterworks from TDEC, and you will be able to see that money come in, and that can also be used for future capital projects. I don't know if anyone has any specific questions.
Any questions for Tara regarding the quarterly financial report for the period ending September 30th? All right, hearing none. Certainly want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope you stay healthy. Enjoy this time with your family. Our next meeting will be at 7:30 on March 15th, 2021. Not sure at this point as to whether that will be a virtual meeting or it will be safe to get back in the water, and we'll convene at the wastewater plant. Hopefully in the very near future we have an opportunity to gather together. Nothing like a sausage biscuit and watch the sun come up at the wastewater plant. So with that, I wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
Please.
I have a motion. Do we have a second to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Y'all have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank y'all.